So it's framer.com/downloads. I'm going to put that in chat regardless, so you guys can do whatever. Also, if you're watching this and you're not following along, this really won't be that useful to you because there's some concepts in here that are a little weird. So I do highly recommend you do that. I'm also going to link a file as well. This is a Figma file. This is a very slightly older version of a file that I actually used recently for production. It's currently live. The guy doesn't want me to announce it until tomorrow, just for the sake of product hunt, but you guys are more than welcome to take a look at it. But this is the real file he gave me. Some assets are missing, but that doesn't really matter for the sake of this particular demonstration. Yeah, so you only need inspect mode for that. Everybody have the app downloaded, logged in? Just want to wait a second until everybody's kind of settled into that stuff. If you're not ready, let me know. Like say something audibly or type it.
I'm good.
Almost there. Jeff's almost there. Okay. Jeff, you're buying me time to fix my swiper integration. Yeah, Bree's almost ready. Okay. I'm going to also share my screen very shortly. Everybody ready? Anybody not ready yet? Ready. Jeff's ready. Bree. Melina, you're going to download the Framer app if you have a Mac, or you can use the browser version. Either way, framer.com/downloads or just framer.com and go ahead and sign up. And then the Figma link that we're going to be going off of is actually in chat as well. So I'm just going to get started. You're not really going to miss all too much in the first couple minutes. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to minimize chat, or at least move it off to the side, so no one will really be able to see it all that well. I won't be able to see myself. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
I don't know why Ivan's, for some reason, picture for me. I'm like a tiny little box.
You can close him. I think he has an X on top right.
No, leave
Oh,
Ivan.
yeah.
Come on. We want to see Ivan.
Oh, yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah, I didn't want to accidentally close the video for it. Okay, so for Framer, we're only going to be going about halfway through kind of the entire flow just for time's sake. But for opening up a specific page, wow, I don't know where it is. Anyways, for Framer, we're going to be going over the panels themselves. Oh, I've got it open right here. I wrote a little something. Yeah. We're going to be going over downloading the app, which we've already done, obviously, stacks, breakpoints, text styles, components, and variants. And so this will be enough for you to get going on taking a client or even building your own particular site. And there's some quirks that make it a little different than Webflow. So I'm actually going to start with a brand new file. I've got like the actual file here that I built, but I'm going to start new so that we can walk through how it works. I like to start by creating a blank template. I'm just going to increase my window size a little bit. I'm sharing the whole thing. So it's a bit like Figma, if you're used to that at all, and that all the action controls are on the right, all the navigation is on the left, and then your tools can be found on the top. Left, and then your tools can be found on the top. It even shares kind of the same tabular system in here. One of the things that I want you to turn on first is actually within this menu here. This is a hidden thing that I didn't realize until I'd gotten far into the process, but it's just easier to turn it on now rather than later. So if you go into this menu in the upper left, and you go into view, there's a check mark where you can say show background blur. And what that does is it enables us to turn background blur on for specific elements when you're scrolling over it. It's a bit of a hidden feature. I'm not sure why, but definitely important to have. So I'm going to flip that on. That way we have it for the future. So just like Figma does, it splits everything up. You see where people like Framer. Yeah, just like Figma does, it splits everything up here. We've got our pages. This is really obvious. We can create new pages for maybe there's a 404 page here. If I click here, maybe I can make an about page. In this case, it's an FAQ because I had that on the real site. And just like Webflow, you can also go into your page settings and you can change the title of the page. You can change some of the SEO elements. You can even add open graph images, custom code, things like that. So it's got a little bit of everything that you're used to. It's not exactly like a shocking revelation. And then you've also got a CMS. So CMS is extremely similar to Webflow, very easy to integrate. And all you have to do is click to add one. Canvas is basically the same thing as a frame. So we're not even gonna go over that. And then you've got your layers panel. We'll go over that very shortly. And then assets. This is a bit like the inspect panel that's usually on the right in Figma. If I actually go over to the inspect or the design panel here, you can see that I've got local styles like an H1, H2, 3, 4, some body text, and then just one single light gradient color style here. That being said, there should be a yellow one as well, but I don't think the client included that at first. So that's really similar to what the styles panel is over here. You're essentially like recreating these things to use over and over again in the desktop. So within your canvas, this actually works a little differently than Webflow in that rather than being restricted to a full view and having to squish it from left to right, you basically get an entire artboard just like Figma does. And the beauty of it is that you can also control the breakpoint for it. So by default, the desktop is currently set to 1200. And then when you add a breakpoint for tablet, by clicking the plus up here and clicking tablet, you automatically create one of those. And then by adding a phone, same thing. And if for some reason you find that maybe the phone is not a big enough size for you, or maybe it's you have like a slightly smaller size, you can add an even further breakpoint. We can call this one extra small phone. And we can say the width is 320. That way we cover all bases just in case. Because I had an incident like that recently. I think the other thing that really differentiates this from Webflow is that let's say that we add an element here of text. I'm gonna say this is my headline text, and I'm just gonna like bump up the size of this. Let me give it the title element. One really cool feature is that you can see immediately that it propagates across all the different breakpoints. So we've got desktop, tablet, mobile, it disappears, and I'll explain why. One thing that you have to get used to in Framer is that Framer, above all else, really wants things to be position absolute. Okay, I really want you to remember that. You can be a designer and not know how the web works and immediately put together a website. The problem is that everything will be position absolute. This is sort of the issue with Dreamweaver back in the day. So if I put something in here, it just wants to be absolute immediately. And you can actually see that on the far right. This is our control panel here. So if I were to, for example, move this over, you'll notice that it immediately corrects itself because it's saying, okay, it is absolute 505 pixels from the left and 533 from the right. And if we check on the mobile version, same thing, but a little squished down. So this is something that we want to try to avoid for the most part as we're working through this. Are there any questions so far? Okay, great. The first step I'm going to do, this is kind of what I do on most projects anyways, is actually create our text styles. So this is a really good way to get used to how the text style feature works within Framer. So I'm going to start with this hero right here, this H1, and it looks like it is SF Pro, which for our sake, we're going to swap it to Inter, semi-bold at 88 pixels. And then 88 is the height as well, so it's 100%. So right now, by default, Framer creates styles for you automatically. This one's called title, for example. And the annoying part about Framer that nobody really talks about is that it only goes H1 through 3. So there is no H4, H5, and H6. It just goes H1 through 3 and then right to paragraph. So when we go to make it heading 4, it'll end up being a paragraph element with a different style. So I'm going to do the heading style here. I'm going to change this. This is obviously enter already. I'm going to make this, I actually don't know what the weight is here, semi-bold. So I'm going to make this semi-bold, and then I know that the color is, I think it's like pure white. Yeah, it's pure white. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to close that out. I'm going to make it pure white. It's obviously left aligned, no text decoration. And then we're going to make this 88 and make our paragraph, or make our line height. You can switch between ems, pixels, and percent. I'm going to go with percent on here, so it's 100%. And then the letter is minus 1.5, which if we look at this example, it is minus 1%. So I'm going to do minus 1 here. And we've got it. It's already done, but obviously we can't see it because it's white. So we're going to change the background fill here. So if you click on the background up here, again, it's just like Figma, you can change your fill automatically. I'm going to change this to, I don't think it's pure black. I believe it's like a charcoal color, 161616. Done. And because I think we're going to use this again, this particular color, we're actually going to create a shared color here. So if you have the desktop open and you have the fill open and you're changing the colors, right where it says presets, this is what Framer automatically comes with. If you click that to shared styles instead, this is where the colors you create will go. So I'm going to create a color here and I'm going to call it black. That way it's used over and over again. And I'm just going to keep going through the process. You can go as slow or as quickly as you want, but I'm just going to create some of those shared styles. There's only a couple of them. Just like Figma, I'm going to click this and I'm going to option click drag this so that it's duplicated. And I'm going to change this to our H2, our subtitle. And then I'm just going to do the H2 style. So I think that that is actually this part right here where it says how teams use Writer. Even though it says H3 here, semantically, I'm going to give this an H2. And then for this one, I'm going to give it an H3. So this is 40 pixels, 40 pixel font size, 40 pixel line height, and it's also semi-bold. So I'm just going to do that real quick. I believe this is also -1. And if it's not, who cares? Not a big deal. I'm also going to set the default color of this one to white. And we don't have to worry too much about that. We can change it later. That's our H2. Go to the H3 real quick. By the way, is there any questions so far while I'm working on the textiles? It's pretty easy to follow along.
Yeah, I just have one question, Devin. So
Yeah.
the shared colors, is that the same as saying styles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you making this on? I can't see your pages. Do you have a styles page for this?
Oh, what are you referring to in Figma?
No, on in Framer. You're making this like this is a whole like styles page.
No. So
Oh, you're
I'm
just
not
building
making-
styles right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just building my styles within the particular section.
Understood.
So I've got, let's see, this is my H3. Okay, I'm just gonna add this a white color here, and I'm using white over and over again. So I'm just gonna create a shared color for that, and I can go back and I can reapply that shared color within these particular textiles here. So those are set, and I'm just going to do one last thing, which is this body regular copy. And it looks like everywhere it's used, it uses white, but at 72%. So we're just going to go with that. That way we don't have to adjust it later. This is 18 with 26 line height. And I like to use percentages, so I'm just going to do the math on that one. It's 130%. In case you want to know. So just like Figma and I guess technically Webflow, with shared color styles, if I want to have this be a white color and I want to have the text be a slightly reduced opacity, unfortunately, I have to have another color style for that. So you can either create a whole new one, or you can just say choose custom, and we're just going to completely break away from the original. We don't really have to use it if we don't want to. Y'all good so far? Anyone?
Yeah, no,
confused?
I'm good.
Okay, this is pretty simple so far.
Yeah. It's almost like the same as like Sketch. I don't know if you use Sketch. or
Yeah.
Figma. They all follow pretty much the same pattern.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's the part where if you're not familiar with auto layout or Flexbox, it might get a little tricky. So I'm just going to delete these three, and I'm going to go back to my Figma file, and I'm going to copy paste this text here because we're just going to get right to building this particular hero section. So just like I told you, as soon as you put something down on the canvas in Framer, it wants to position absolute as hard as possible. And we don't really want it to do that. We want to kind of do our own thing. And so we're going to use a feature called stacks, which is a bit like auto layout or Flexbox, where the content container is either determined by the content inside, or it's determined by the size that you set in particular. And we're going to go all the way up from each individual container that carries the text and the images all the way to the entire page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate our hero here, and I'm going to turn this into our paragraph tag. And I'm going to grab that piece of text that is our subheader within the Figma file. So this writer is a Figma plugin that uses AI to create smart copy faster. So I'm just going to plug that in there. And now what I'm going to do, you might want to watch this if you're not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this particular piece of text in this one, and I'm going to hit Command Enter. And what that does for us is it creates a stack automatically. Because the only other way to create a stack is, oh no, sorry, it's not Command Enter, it's Option Command Enter. The only other way to create a stack is to go through this really annoying process where you create a stack by inserting a stack, and then you have to like drag your stuff in, and it gets really complicated really quickly. So I recommend, just like Figma, you select your things first, and then Option Command, I believe that's Control for Windows. Yeah, Option Command Return. So we're going to turn that into a stack. And just like in Webflow, the stack gets a layout control here, where you can choose whether you want a stack, which is Flexbox, or you can choose a grid, which is fairly self-explanatory. It's a grid just like it is in Webflow. You can choose the direction, if you want it left and right or top and bottom. You could choose the distribution. Unfortunately, Framer always starts at center distribution. I think they try to be preemptive for the user, for people who maybe have never built anything for the web, and just go with center, because most people probably want to center things. I like to immediately flip this to start. That way it's just sort of like a default state. And I'm going to make the alignment left. I'm going to keep wrap off because it doesn't really matter for these particular children. And then the gap is another really weird part of Framer. So unlike Webflow, where you can say that you want a particular distance between the row and the column, with gap you only get one. So it's just one single measurement between all of them. So if, for example, I've got, you don't have to follow along with this part. If I've got 3 squares here and all of them are put into a grid and I start to increase the gap on those, the gap is increased on the column and on the row. And there's nothing we can do about that. That's just a part of Framer. So the same thing applies here. And then, so I'm gonna go with, let's see, I think the gap here is 16. So I'm gonna make the gap 16. So it's just like that. And then there's no padding. We don't have to worry about that. The next part is taking this and making it a bit more like auto layout in Figma. So rather than us determining the size, because it ends up cutting things off, what I want is for this particular headline to fit across the entire width. So within the particular stack, if I click into this headline text and I click width, fill, it will try to fill as much content as possible. So if I select the parent again and I scale it, you can see it acts just like auto layout or flexbox where it flows to the next line. Really simple to understand. The height is fit by default automatically. Width, same deal. We're gonna say we want it to be fill. That way when we collapse this thing, it looks good. But notice how it gets cut off here. It's just like Figma where you need to set the inner child elements and you also need to set the parent element. So the parent element also needs to be fit content on the height, so it adjusts for everything. How are we doing?
Oh, we're good. I have a question for you. Is
Yeah.
the default sizing, is it pixels only, or can you actually use ems or rems or percentage?
You can use percentage, and ems are for some elements. Rems I have not seen at all. Yeah. But if, for example, I have this element selected here, the parent element, for the width, if I click that drop down, you can see fixed. So that's a pixel size. You can set it to relative, where you can do percentage. So I can say 50% width of the viewport, or I can say fit content. In some cases, it allows you to actually do viewport itself. So you can say 100 VH if you want.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
For the height. Yeah.
And Devin, what about font sizes? Like, I'm not seeing like a way to change the units for font sizes here.
Yeah, so we're gonna do that right now, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got our little hero set up, but it's not exactly spectacular, and that's totally fine. But we're gonna cover the font size changes, and then we're gonna do a button so that you know how to do it across the board. So for font size changes, from desktop to tablet, we're not really gonna worry about that. He didn't specify anything, so we're not. But from tablet to mobile, things start to break and get kind of shitty. So if we go over to the mobile side and we check out the font size on here, it's same width, same weight, sorry, same letter spacing, everything except for the font size change. So how do we deal with that? So it doesn't really matter where you start. I like to start on the mobile itself. That way I can see what the changes look like in real time. And if you go over to title, where we first created our shared style, and you edit the title, there's a part where it says breakpoints type. And this is where you start to add a breakpoint. The font size changes depending on what you want. This changes depending on what you want. So for this in particular, if you click add breakpoint, it'll say large, medium, small. And you don't really have to worry about what that means. You just have to decide on your own way you use it. Yeah, Christine, see you later. Glad you could join. And just like with Webflow, the width is determining the font size. So for large, it's obviously 1200 because that's our desktop size. And then for medium, same thing. The tablet is automatically 810, and small, zero width, which is impossible. The annoying part about Framer is that it automatically adds a middle size for you. Even if you don't want it, it'll try to basically interpolate between a small and a large. So we set the large to be 88 pixels, and then medium for some reason is 70. So I'm just going to go and reset that back to 88. That way they're the same. You can flip back and forth between the two. And then for small, we're going to set our size to 40. Just like that. It's done. That's how you do the responsive part of text. Ivan, I see you typing. You can talk. Do you have questions?
No. I just got to say that I had to go too. I appreciate you doing this. Yeah. I had it like in the back burner, and now I'm like in front of my like you need to jump on Framer. So I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, no problem. So we've covered text sizes on different breakpoints. They're actually really easy to implement. If you want, you can add a little breakpoint for your middle breakpoint. I'm going to do we'll do 64 here. I think that feels right. And we'll just leave the paragraph the same for all because that's what he did on his mockups. The next thing we're going to do is create a button with hover states, with text and everything like that. So we've talked a lot about text, but we haven't talked a lot about the frame element. And the frame element acts just like it does within Figma, and it essentially acts as a div within Webflow. So what I'm going to do is put a piece of text down here, and I'm going to call this, I'm just going to say button. It's going to be really hard to see here, right? And I'm going to give this its own style. I'm going to call this button. So again, really quick, if you have your text selected here, you click Styles, New Style, Button. And again, you're only limited to H1 through 3 in the paragraph, unfortunately. So for this particular style, we're just going to style it like the button that we see in the actual Figma file. It's like font size 18, line height 32. And the color is 161616, which we have already created a shared style for. So we just click that. And just like you would do in Figma, I'm going to wrap this in a stack like we did earlier with Option Command Enter. And you'll see nothing changes because we haven't even applied a background color yet. But what we're going to do is add a fill here, and I'm going to take this yellow color here. And I'm going to create a shared style with that. That way we have that. I'm going to call it yellow because I'm original. And I think I actually messed up I think this is a different weight. It's probably like medium or semi-bold or something. Who cares? I'm going to add the padding here. So we've got 8 on top and 16 on the left and the right. And we'll go over the icon in just a second. So just like with Figma, you can add separate padding. You could just say 16 here, or you could click this icon on the right, and we'll change it to, I believe it's 8 on top and 8 on the bottom. Is that right? You guys looking at it? Yeah. Border radius, same deal. It's 12, so we're going to make it 12 border radius down here. Oops, did I do it on the wrong one? No, I forgot to input that. There we go. Cool. So we've got our button here, and we want to get an icon in. I think that this is actually one of the better parts of Figma that I really enjoy, or Framer that I really enjoy. We could, if we want, we could literally right-click this arrow, which I think he implemented it as font awesome. I'm just going to outline it. We could, if we want, right-click it and copy it as SVG. And in Framer, you can just paste. It's kind of great. You can even basically double-click in there and change the actual color of the SVG without any extra work, like Figma, where you have to, or like Webflow, where you have to, say that it's current color and things like that. But we're not going to do that.
That's super
I actually
nice.
think that, yeah, it's really great. I actually think that there's a better way. I know for a fact that these are Google material icons. So if I click Insert and I go over to icons, there's this whole set of icons here that just automatically comes with it. please never use these first three. They're just fucking awful. Just don't. But we're going to choose material in this case. And when we click it, you'll notice it's purple. It's basically like a symbol or a component. And I'm going to change this icon here. So if you click on the icon after you've added it, I want to check. If you click the icon after you've added it on the right action panel, then you can change what icon you want. This part, unfortunately, is not great. You have to literally scroll through every single icon by name that Google has. I don't in particular know the icon name, but I think it's arrow. I think it's arrow forward. Yeah, I got it. It's arrow forward. So you can hit ARR on your keyboard when you click this. It'll take you right to it. And then looks like equal to can fix the Chrome extension. Yeah. What does click the search button do? I actually don't really know. It doesn't do anything. I've clicked it before, and I think you can like type the name. Yeah, but it's a little. You have to know the exact name in order for it to work. Yeah. So I'm going to change this to black because that's what we found in our button, and then we can change the style to rounded because that's actually what we find in our Figma file. So that's kind of nice that it includes all of these options for us, and we don't have to do any other work. I'm going to drag this. Literally, you can just drag this right inside of your frame that you've automatically created, the stack, and resize it. I think that this one in particular is, we're going to go with 16 pixels, I think is what it is. And you can just drag and rescale that without any effort. I'm just going to check the spacing between these. So selecting the parent element, then I can start to change the gap between the arrow and the text. Looks like it's 18. I'm just going to increase this a little bit to 24 because I kind of like it. And now we're going to do is actually take this and we're going to make this into a component so that you can hover it and it'll change colors and things like that. Should I wait a moment? Is everybody caught up? If you want me to wait, speak now. Cool. So Framer's a little bit weird in that if you want to animate something, you either have to abide by their rules or it has to be a component. So in this case, because it's a button and we're going to reuse it anyways, we want to turn it into a component. So you can just right click that and say create component, or it's just like in Figma, you can hit Option Command K, and I'm going to call this button, and it takes us to a completely different page. And this is because Framer treats components as like their own unique thing. So if at any time you end up in a component page and you just press this, back to your page button here, it'll take you back to where you originally were. We're going to be working in here. So this is I think the part that's a little bit weird. So you can create variants here. So we can have a variant that's maybe disabled, or we can do a secondary button. But for this particular hero, we want to have a hover state. So pretty much all you have to do is click that and click hover, and you've got a hover state, and you can do whatever you want with this. So for this in particular, because this is a stack, I can't move this arrow to the right unless I change this to position absolute, which is something that you can do if you want. I think in this particular case, what I'm going to do is increase the gap here. So the difference between these two is just one is primary and one is the hover state. So I'm going to call this one just primary. Maybe, and you can do whatever you want for this. I'm just like, I've already built this. So I'm just having a little bit of fun with it. I'm going to give this like maybe like a white stroke, but like a little lower. And then maybe I'll give it like a new yellow color. It's maybe like a little darker or something. That way when you hover it, it changes. And you can control the animation right inside the panel as well. So if you've got your button selected here, see that the line leads to this one. I'm going to say transition. and you could choose from their different eases. I'm going to go with the ease out. I'm just going to like drag this. It doesn't really matter all that much. And I'm going to set the time to 0.3. Yeah.
Can I point to something that I just saw while I was playing and following
Yeah.
along? The accessibility section. It allows you to select the tag and area label stuff. And surprise, you can create a real button with the button tag in Framer while you cannot do the same thing in Webflow. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And if you want to see this button in action, I haven't gone over this at all yet, but at any point in time in Framer, you can click and preview literally just individual components themselves. So there's like a little play button above it. You could just click it and hover on it, and you can see how that functions. So I put like a really sticky button on there, and it's like really, really bouncy. So that's kind of fun. You can hit escape to go back. So now if we go back to FAQ, well, sorry, I named it FAQ. I accidentally put it on the wrong page, guys. Now if we go back to our home page and we click play in the upper right, our page is already there. And if we start to shrink it, we can see that the text shrinks down because we've set up those shared text styles. And the button as well also shares that text style. And we can create one that changes that so that, maybe the font size doesn't change. And you can hover it and, it works like you set it up. But the problem is that it doesn't really go anywhere right now. It's just essentially a frame that doesn't do anything. And so that's a really easy fix. We just create a link for it. We'll go over that shortly. So the other thing that I want to add is when you're creating components, you can start to create these things called overrides. So obviously we don't want this to be called button in the final result. We want to have the button all throughout the page, but we want the text to say something different. So we can create these component overrides on the right. So anywhere you see a plus right here to the left of a control, that's when you can create a component override. So if for some reason you want to change the rotation on a piece of text, I don't know what you would, or in our case, you want to change the content. So I'm going to create a content for the plain text. You can do formatted text if you want. Maybe you want to like make something bold or not. I'm going to say plain text, and I'm going to call this button text. And you can create a placeholder for this, like you can say like replace, just in case, or like click here. Now it's tied up. So if we go back on the right-hand panel, we can see where it says button text override, and we can say sign up now. And it's automatically done for us. We can jump back in and we can see that in action here. It takes all the rules from the button, the hover state, and applies them here. Easy. Just gonna go back in one more time. Yeah. So the other aspect is if we want, for example, to link this, because it's a component and we haven't set an override for it, we have two options. Either we can duplicate it and we can detach it, but we all know how that's kind of a problem when it comes to recreating things. Or you can take this, jump back into the instance, and give the entire thing a link override. So we can basically say this button is now a linkable item. We can say we want it to be a new tab or not, or we can create an override for that. Or we can say if we want it to be smooth scroll, so maybe scrolling to a different section on the page, but in this case, we're going to be linking it externally. And down here, you can also create additional styles for like your cursor. So if you want the button to have a certain cursor style, when you're hovering on it, you can do that. So for me, I want the hover to have a hand cursor, which I think I turned it on. Yeah, I did. I wanted to have the hand cursor. That way, when you actually hover on it in the preview, it looks like a real button, right? Easy. So now I feel like we've kind of got all of the basics that you possibly need for this to just immediately start building out the full page. So if I were to start building out this page, right, we've already got this hero section. We need this little square here. I think that I want to show you my next favorite part of Framer. So I'm not going to bother creating a stack yet for all of this. What I'm going to do is actually create a frame here. I'm just going to, you don't have to follow along this part if you don't want to. Even though this has a gradient, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do the gradient. You can do them here. I'm just going to do one color, and I'm going to add a border radius there. So I'm just skipping a couple steps here. I'm not even looking. I just want to show you this feature. So we've got this frame here. It is currently position absolute, which is not great. Again, you really want to fight against this if possible. But the beauty of Framer is this exact element right here. So let's say I have this selected. It's built really nicely. If I go in here, you can see that everything is auto layout. This would be really easy to build in literally any other app, but we don't have to do any effort. So if I go to plugins, there's actually a Framer plugin. And all I have to do is click run, and then it tells me paste in Framer. So I'm going to paste it. I think it messed up a little bit. And this is actually really easy to fix because some of these are missing icons. I set this to fit content. This right here is basically ready to go, like in web as an asset. And it's not SVG. It's all built within Framer, essentially. So I can position that as absolute if I want. So I think the next step, since we've only got like 10, yeah, it's pretty bonkers. It's great too, because it just loads instantly on a page. The other part that I want to cover too is like building out different sections. I mentioned earlier that I use the stacks feature a lot. That's because it's closest to auto layout. And if you don't use it, everything's going to be position absolute. For the sake of time, we're just going to speed run this part real quick. So if I have the parent element selected and I have sign up now selected, I'm going to make this a stack. I'm going to make that left aligned and give this a gap of like 32. So it's a bit more normal. And then for this as well, yeah, these are together. I want to create a stack from these two. Oops. So I'm going to create a stack from these two. And then say fit content on both, so that our height and width is not determined by the container, but the elements inside. And then what I do now is I take the entire page and I make that a stack itself. And the reason I do that is so that you don't have to worry about the position absolute stuff as much. So if you want to add another section, you can add that really easily. They have pre-built sections that are really nice. You just have to restyle them, which is easy if we've already gotten our text styles. Or you can just take your particular section that you've already done and paste it. And because it's like auto layout, all you have to do is move it around with the arrows. So I'm just gonna like show you that real quick. So now if I just hit up arrow, it swaps those two sections really easily. And then just like in Webflow, if, for example, I want to do something where maybe on mobile, I want this to be a vertical stack. Let me just delete this real quick, so it's easier. If I want this to be a vertical stack, all I have to do now is click the vertical on there and start adjusting some of these elements. Like this is maybe a little too wide. Obviously, this is fixed, so it needs to be filled. And then I can add padding on the entire parent. So maybe I want it to be 24 on the left and the right. Oops. And if I click play, you can start to see how that breaks down. It's a bit of work and we're running out of time, but yeah, I'd love to cover any questions if you guys have any right now. But I think that with stacks and with components and shared textiles, you essentially have enough now where you could take a client if you wanted to. It's really easy to understand. I think that the most complex part is just getting the stacks there, understanding components and shared styles, and then starting to play with each different piece. So for like the pricing section, for example, which you can see within the Figma file, this pricing section looks a lot like this one. So all I did was I added literally the template from the framework gives you and changed some of these text styles and the background and the fill. And it was pretty much done. So yeah, I'm gonna stop screen sharing for now. I really wish I had more time. I think that there's so much to cover here, but I genuinely think that if you were following along at all, you could easily create your own page with this. I'm going to leave that Figma link. If you want to try to recreate that page, I highly encourage it. I think a lot of people were discounting Framer because they thought, they were loyal to Webflow, but I think remaining loyal to one company is just a way to not make as much money. Any other questions?
I can just see kind of like the process of how it would build in Webflow would just even carry over into Framer. Like if you have a page wrapper, and you put everything in the page wrapper, like vertical padding or stuff like that. Like vertical padding or stuff like that. Like just setting up as frames, whatever they call it.
Yeah, totally. Let me show you actually the full build, if you don't mind, because I do want to show that really quick. Okay, so this is the end result. I think some sections are missing some pieces because I was waiting for him, but you can actually check this out at tryrider.app, which is the website. But it's built exactly how I told you guys I was going to build it. So if I look at the layers here on the desktop, the entire thing is a stack. Oops, there we go. The entire thing is a stack, and I've got the navigation as a full width element. And then I created like you said, I created a wrapper for this particular feature so that I could have 48 left and right, but have the navigation go full width. And then each section gets just a complete fill without any left and right padding. And then just like I would build it in Webflow, each section gets a top and bottom padding. You can kind of see that here, 64 and 96 in this case. And then I've got a call to action that is a component. And if I click in here, I've created variants for the desktop and the mobile. So this one's really easy. I'm not sure why this is showing as desktop, but on mobile, I've got a breakpoint for this, so it automatically breaks down for me. I don't have to do anything. I'm just not sure why it's showing like that. And then for the button, components can be nested. So I've got a component within the component, the button inside of the CTA. I've got primary, secondary, primary disabled, and secondary disabled. And you can choose to have hover states on those or not. And I've got some features where the arrow rotates a little bit. And then I've got a little navigation feature here as well. So this one breaks down for desktop, tablet, and mobile. You'll be able to build components in Framer based them in Webflow. Really cool. Because building components in Framer is really, really easy. I think that's probably like my favorite part of working with Framer is just how easy it is to put something together and not have to name any classes. If you look at my layer names, they're all like wrapper, hero, left content, right content, testimonials, pricing. You don't have to name them anything in particular. Framer automatically does that for you. And the best part is that when you click publish, if I click update, it takes seconds. Like that's done. It's ready to go. You don't have to click publish and wait like 15 seconds. It's kind of amazing. And it's really performant too. Yeah, you could. Well, if you're following along, I hope you had fun. If you weren't, still same thing.
Well, I did have a lot of fun following along, and especially like creating different states for the button. It's so straightforward. Like it's in the middle of the interface. You don't have to go to each direction section, so it's a lot easier. So yeah, I'm impressed by Framer. The first time I tried, I didn't fully understood how I could like block things out the way we block things with divs and etc. in Webflow. But yeah, this was really helpful, and I see a lot of potential here. I'm really tempted to maybe create like a template for Framer just to understand how it works. Yeah, let's do that.
The other part that I didn't go over, only for the sake of time, is that you mentioned really briefly the accessibility section. This is really useful because Framer's obviously not good at naming classes, and it doesn't do sections for you. It just says, okay, everything's a div, and that can be kind of a problem when it comes to SEO and accessibility. So one feature that it does have is that you can have an ARIA label for things. You can set tab index, and you can create tags for sections. So obviously each of my sections is named section. I've got like my nav here as a component that should be, nav tag, nav tag, and then the buttons as well. I think our buttons, no, I didn't give them a tag. I think they're just the A tag because when you create a link, it automatically does it for you and you don't really have a choice over that. There's so many little features here that kind of add up to make something really special that I really recommend you guys play with. Yeah, send me a Framer site. I'll give you feedback on that for sure. You can send me a Framer site to take a look at, like from a structural standpoint or from like a design standpoint, and I'll comment on either of those things because I know they can be a little daunting at first structurally.
Just a quick observation, right? Because I'm exploring the user interface. There's the section where it says code overrides, and it looks very interesting because you can actually edit the code for that specific component in real time inside Framer. If you click there, it's actually I think it's a React component. I hate React, but I'll have to learn it. And well, I think that's the answer for like how can you add custom code on a Framer website. Looks very promising.
I don't know React, so for me going through it was like really confusing. But if you do know React at all and you want to use Framer, like I could see it being really powerful because there was, for example, a pre-built component that I had used for the client that you could click and copy text to the clipboard, and it's automatically built in. The only thing I didn't like is that when you click it, it shrinks down and it looks kind of goofy, and it doesn't give you any confirmation that the text was copied. And I wanted to modify that, and I could figure out a couple of things, but then, I don't really know Framer all that well, or React all that well, so I wasn't able to change it, and I ended up going with some custom JavaScript. I didn't know Maria was in here, Maria the second. So I got to jump back to work, but I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys build like a little Framer site, or if you want, follow along with that particular Figma file. It's a really easy one to build. Use stacks. Stop using a position absolute. Give it a shot. Let me know how it goes.
Awesome.
Thanks, Devin.
Thanks, Devin.